The Grand Assembly Hall stretched so far that its walls disappeared into shadow. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the chamber, their voices creating a sound like distant thunder. At the center of it all, Ambassador Deho stood alone on a platform that floated above the floor. His hands were steady, but his heart felt heavy. He knew what was coming. The hall fell silent when Vexter rose to speak. The Korathi leader was tall and covered in silver scales that caught the light, his 4 eyes fixed on Deho with something that looked like disgust. "We gather today to address the human problem," Vexter announced. His voice carried to every corner of the massive room. "For 20 years, we have welcomed humanity into our community. For 20 years, we have watched them break our rules and ignore our traditions. They expand too fast. They ask too many questions. They refuse to wait for proper approval before acting." Deho wanted to speak, but the rules said he had to wait. He watched as evidence appeared on the massive screens around the hall. Images of human colonies spreading across new worlds, records of human ships traveling without permits, videos of human negotiators arguing with council officials. "Look at this," Vexler continued, pointing to a screen. "When the mining dispute happened on Keller 3, what did humans do? They ignored our mediation process. They flew directly to the planet and worked out a deal with the local population in 3 days. 3 days. Our process takes 3 months for good reason. It ensures fairness and proper consideration." A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Deho felt his jaw tighten. The Keller III situation had been an emergency. People were starving because the dispute had stopped food shipments. The human solution had saved lives. But he still had to wait his turn to speak. Telmoon of the Solarian people spoke next. She was small and delicate, with skin that seemed to glow with soft blue light. "I fear humanity," she said quietly, but her words carried weight. "They feel everything so strongly. Joy, anger, fear, love. They make decisions based on these feelings. How can we trust beings who act on emotion rather than logic?" More voices joined in. The Vexanali complained that humans laughed too loudly. The Korthon said humans took risks that endangered everyone around them. The Palaxian representative mentioned how humans had once jumped into a battle to save a ship they had never met before, risking their own lives for strangers. Finally, Vexter turned to Deho. "You may speak in your defense." Deho took a breath and looked out at the thousands of faces watching him. "Everything you say is true," he began. "We do expand quickly because we dream of new horizons. We do ask questions because we want to understand. We do act on emotion because we believe some things matter more than protocol." He pointed to the screen showing the Keller 3 incident. "We solved that problem in 3 days because children were hungry. Your 3-month process is thorough, but those children would have starved waiting for it. We didn't ignore your rules out of disrespect. We ignored them because lives mattered more. This is exactly the problem." Vexter's voice boomed. "You believe you know better than civilizations that have existed for millions of years. You've been in space for barely a century, yet you think you can improve our systems." "We don't think we know better," Deho said. "We just think differently. The galaxy is big enough for different approaches." But the chamber erupted in disagreement. Voices overlapped, arguing and accusing. Deho could see it was pointless. They had already decided. Captain Nari watched from the visitors' gallery, her military uniform crisp and proper. She had escorted Deho to this hearing, and now she had to watch him fight alone. Her hands gripped the railing hard enough to hurt. This wasn't justice. This was fear. The council was afraid of what humanity represented: change. The vote was called. Deho stood silent as thousands of lights appeared in the air, each one representing a member species. Red for banishment. Blue for acceptance. The red lights outnumbered the blue 10-1. Vexter's announcement rang through the hall. By the authority of this council, humanity is hereby banished from civilized space. All humans have 30 days to evacuate colonies and stations outside the Sol system. All wormhole access to human territory will be sealed. This decision is final. Deho felt the words hit him like physical blows. 30 days to abandon everything humanity had built among the stars. 30 days to return to the single system where Earth circled its yellow sun. They were being locked away, cut off from the galaxy they had just begun to explore. The walk back to his shuttle felt like a dream. Nari walked beside him, silent and angry. Other beings moved aside as they passed, some looking apologetic, most looking relieved. "We should fight this," Nari said, once they were inside the shuttle. "We have ships. We have weapons, and prove them right." Deho shook his head. "No, we'll go home. We'll follow their order." The journey back to Seoul took 3 days. Deho spent most of it staring out the window at the stars. So many worlds out there, so many wonders humanity would never see now. The wormhole gate appeared ahead, the massive ring of metal and energy that allowed instant travel across light years. Their gateway home. Soon, their prison. The shuttle passed through, and Deho felt the familiar lurch of wormhole transit. When they emerged, Earth filled the view. Beautiful and blue and suddenly very small. Behind them, the wormhole gate began to shut down. He watched the light fade from its ring. The last connection to the greater galaxy, going dark. Messages were already flooding in from human colonies and stations. Panic, anger, confusion. Earth's government was working on evacuation plans. 30 days to bring everyone home. President Higgins' face appeared on every screen across the system that night. She stood in the Oval Office, and her expression was calm but determined. "My fellow humans," she said, "today the galaxy told us we don't belong. They see our differences as flaws. Our passion is weakness. Our innovation is danger." She paused, and a slight smile crossed her face. "So be it. If they want us gone, we'll leave. But we won't stop being who we are. Today I'm authorizing Project Genesis. We're going to build something amazing right here in our own system. We're going to prove that humanity doesn't need the galaxy's approval to thrive. One day they'll realize what they lost. Until then, we have work to do." Deho watched the speech from his apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Despite everything, he felt a spark of hope. Humanity had always done its best work when people said something was impossible. Maybe being locked in their home system wasn't an ending. Maybe it was a beginning. 50 years had passed since the Great Banishment. The galaxy had mostly forgotten about humanity. The species that once caused such controversy had become a footnote in council records. Most young beings didn't even know humans had existed. Navigator Junho certainly hadn't heard of them. He was young for his species, barely into his second decade of life. His job was to plot courses for merchant convoys, and today's route took them through an area marked as dead space on the old maps. The region where something called Sol System used to have a gate. "Why are we going this way?" asked the convoy leader, Captain Rel. "Saves us 2 days," Junho explained, checking his instruments. "Nothing out here but an old sealed system. The gate's been dead for decades." But as they approached the coordinates, Junho's instruments started showing impossible readings. Energy signatures. Lots of them. His primary eyes widened, while his secondary eyes checked and rechecked the data. "Captain, you need to see this." The screen showed something that shouldn't exist. The Sol system was supposed to be primitive and dark. Instead, it blazed with activity. Massive structures orbited every planet. Ships moved between them in organized patterns. Energy readings suggested technology more advanced than anything the convoy possessed. "That can't be right," Rel muttered. "Run diagnostics." Diagnostics confirmed it. Everything was real. Somehow, in 50 years of isolation, supposedly dangerous humans had built an empire in their own backyard. Inside the Sol system, Dr. Murray looked up from her work as alarms chimed softly. The scientist was old now, her hair more gray than black, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She had spent 5 decades pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Without council regulations telling her what she couldn't do, she had achieved things that would have seemed like magic to her younger self. "We have visitors," her AI assistant announced. A merchant convoy, 10 ships, holding position at the outer boundary. Ray smiled. It had been years since anyone from outside had come close enough to see what humanity had accomplished. "Alert Captain Suban. Let's say hello." The patrol ship Horizon was sleek and silver, shaped like a blade cutting through space. It moved faster than any council ship could, powered by fusion drives that humanity had perfected decades ago. Captain Subin was young, born after the banishment, and to her, the Sol system was the entire universe. But she had studied the old records. She knew about the galaxy beyond. Approach slowly, she ordered her crew. Don't spook them. They're probably surprised we're here. On the merchant convoy, panic was starting to set in. These ships looked nothing like the primitive vessels humans had possessed 50 years ago. They looked dangerous. Should we run? Asked Rel's second officer. Before Rel could answer, a voice came through their communication system. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, the language all species used for trade and diplomacy. Merchant convoy, this is Captain Subin of the human patrol ship Horizon. We mean you no harm. Do you require assistance? Rel stared at the communication panel. Humans? Still here? Still alive? And speaking to them like it was perfectly normal? We're just passing through, Rel said carefully. Didn't know anyone was here. Well, we are, Subin replied, and there was something warm in her voice. Been here the whole time, actually. Where are you headed? The conversation was so casual that Rel found himself relaxing. He explained their route, their cargo, their destination. Subin listened, and then offered something unexpected. You're taking the long way around. There's a current of dark matter about 3 degrees to your left. If you ride it, you'll save fuel and time. I can send you the calculations. Rel accepted, more out of curiosity than trust. When the data arrived, his navigator Junho studied it carefully. The calculations were complex, using mathematics he had never seen before. But when he ran simulations, they worked perfectly. This would save us 6 hours and 20% fuel, Junho said, amazed. Who are you people? Rel asked Subin. There was a pause, then Subin's voice came back with a hint of amusement. We're human. You probably haven't heard of us. The council kicked us out 50 years ago. It said we were too dangerous for the galaxy. So we stayed home and got creative. Before Rel could respond, proximity alarms shrieked. 3 ships had appeared on sensors, moving fast and aggressive. Pirates, by the look of their weapons, powering up. Captain, we're being targeted, Junho shouted. All ships, evasive patterns, Rel ordered, but he knew it was hopeless. His convoy carried valuable medical supplies, but had minimal weapons. They were about to lose everything. Then the Horizon moved, and Rel had never seen a ship move like that. It didn't just accelerate. It seemed to dance through space, placing itself between the convoy and the pirates in seconds. Energy shields flared to life, bright enough to hurt the eyes. Attention unidentified vessels, Sebin's voice had gone cold. You are threatening ships under human protection. Stand down immediately. The pirate leader's response came through, full of contempt. Humans, you're supposed to be extinct. Move aside or be destroyed. Last warning, Subin said calmly. The pirates fired. Rel watched in horror as energy beams that could tear through his ship's hull struck the Horizon's shields and simply stopped. The human ship didn't even shake. Okay then, Subin sighed. Crew, disable their weapons and engines. Non-lethal force only. What happened next lasted maybe 10 seconds. The Horizon fired beams of focused energy that Rel's sensors couldn't identify. Each pirate ship shuddered as their weapon systems exploded from the inside and their engines went dark. 3 ships disabled in 3 shots. Merchant convoy, the threat is neutralized, Subin announced. I've sent an emergency signal to Council Patrol. They'll be here in about 2 hours to arrest these gentlemen. You're free to continue your journey. Rel found his voice. You just saved our lives. It's what neighbors do, Subin said simply. Safe travels, Captain. If you ever need anything, well, you know where to find us now. The Horizon turned and accelerated back toward the inner system, leaving the convoy and 3 disabled pirate ships floating in space. Gunhal stared at his instruments, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. Captain, those weren't council weapons, he said slowly. Their technology is decades ahead of ours, maybe centuries. Was already thinking about what this meant. 50 years ago, humanity had been banished for being too aggressive and unpredictable. 50 years later, they had technology that made council ships look primitive. Instead of using it to take revenge, they had used it to save a random convoy of strangers. "Change course," Rel ordered. "We're going to the nearest council station. People need to hear about this." When Council Patrol arrived to collect the pirates, they found the merchant convoy still there, waiting. Rel insisted on filing a report personally. He told them everything: the structures throughout Sol System, the advanced ships, the casual display of power, the easy kindness. The patrol officer listened with clear skepticism. "Sir, humans were banished decades ago. They had primitive technology. What you're describing is impossible." "Then explain the 3 disabled pirate ships," Rel said flatly. "Explain the calculations my navigator received. Explain what my sensors recorded." He uploaded the data from his ship's logs. The patrol officer went pale as he reviewed it. "I need to forward this up the chain of command." It took 3 days for Rel's report to reach the Council's Central Intelligence Division. It took 3 more days for anyone to take it seriously. By then, other reports were coming in. A research vessel had observed human mining operations in the asteroid belt, using automated systems that worked with incredible efficiency. A deep space probe had detected a massive station under construction around Jupiter, bigger than any Council station. Slowly, reluctantly, the Council began to realize that humanity hadn't withered away in isolation. They had thrived. They had grown. They had become something the galaxy had never expected. And then the first distress signals started coming from the rim worlds. Something was attacking, something new and terrible. Something the Council's mighty fleets couldn't stop. The reports described ships that absorbed damage and adapted to any weapon used against them. An enemy that learned from every battle and came back stronger. In his office on the Council homeworld, Telmoon read the reports with growing fear. He was old now, ancient, even by his species standards. He had voted for humanity's banishment all those years ago. Now, as he looked at the casualty numbers from the rim worlds, he couldn't help but wonder about the species they had locked away. The species that solve problems by refusing to follow the rules. The species that might be the galaxy's only hope. The emergency session of the Galaxy Council was the largest gathering in 50 years. Every species sent representatives, and the massive chamber was filled with worried voices. On the main screen, a star map showed the rim territories in red. 12 systems had gone dark in the past month. 12 systems that now belonged to the swarm. Admiral Kexther stood before the assembly, his usual confidence shaken. The military commander had won hundreds of battles in his long career. He had never faced an enemy like this. "We sent our finest fleet to the Peller system," he reported. 300 ships with the latest weapons and shields. "The swarm destroyed them in 6 hours." He paused, and his voice became quieter. "Survivors report that the swarm adapted to our weapons mid-battle. By the end, our plasma cannons were useless. Our missiles couldn't hit targets that predicted every move." Vexther, now very old but still leading the Council, slammed his hand on the podium. "Impossible. No enemy can adapt that fast." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Kexther replied grimly. He showed footage from the battle, and the assembled leaders watched in horror. The swarm ships looked organic, like massive insects made of metal and energy. They moved in perfect coordination, thousands acting as one mind. When Council ships fired plasma weapons, the swarm's shields adjusted within minutes to absorb the energy. When missiles were launched, the swarm ships moved in patterns that made targeting impossible. "What are they?" someone asked from the crowd. "We don't know," Kexther admitted. "They don't respond to communication. They don't take prisoners. They consume everything in their path and move to the next system. At their current rate, they'll reach the core worlds in 3 months." Panic spread through the chamber. Species that had lived in peace for millennia suddenly faced extinction. The debate went on for hours. Some suggested pulling back and fortifying the core systems. Others wanted to throw everything at the swarm, hoping overwhelming numbers would work. But everyone knew the truth. Nothing they tried had worked so far. In a small office far from the main chamber, a young analyst named Yejin reviewed files that most people had forgotten. She was quarter human, her grandmother having been one of the last humans to leave council space before the banishment. Growing up, her grandmother had told her stories about humanity's brief time among the stars. Stories about their strange way of thinking. Now, Yejin pulled up every record she could find about human military history. What she found was fascinating. Humans had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years, and their history was full of battles where the weaker side won through unexpected tactics. They called it thinking outside the box. They specialized in doing things that the enemy thought it's impossible. There was the battle where human soldiers had hidden in wooden horses to sneak into a city. The war where farmers with basic rifles defeated a massive empire by refusing to fight traditional battles. The conflict where a small navy destroyed a much larger fleet by using weather and terrain in ways no one expected. Humans didn't just break rules. They seemed to enjoy it. They found pride in making plans that other species called crazy. And somehow it worked. Yejin worked through the night, building a presentation. By morning, she had something that might save the galaxy or get her thrown out of the council chambers. She requested an emergency meeting with the Strategic Planning Committee. They almost refused to see her. She was too young, too junior, too mixed blood for many of the old guard to take seriously. But Admiral Kexter, desperate for any new ideas, approved the meeting. Yejin stood before a room of military leaders and showed them her research. "We're losing because we're predictable," she said. "The swarm adapts because it can predict our tactics. We follow doctrine. We use proven strategies. We do what makes sense." "Of course we do," growled an elderly Korathi general. "Proven strategies work." "It's not against this enemy," Yejin countered. She showed footage of human battles. Humans specialized in unpredictability. They won fights by doing things their enemies thought were stupid or impossible. "Look at this." She played a recording of a human military leader explaining his philosophy. When the enemy expects you to retreat, attack. When they expect a frontal assault, go around. When they think you'll use your strongest weapon, use something they've never seen before. "This is madness," another officer said. "War is about discipline and planning, which is why we're losing," Yejin said quietly. "The swarm is better at planning than we are. It's smarter, faster, more coordinated. We can't beat it at our own game. We need to change the game." Admiral Kexter studied the data thoughtfully. "You're suggesting we contact humanity?" "I'm suggesting they're the only species in the galaxy that might think differently enough to surprise the swarm." The room erupted in argument. The idea was offensive to many, desperate to others. Contact the species they had banished? Admit they needed help from beings they had called too dangerous for civilized space? But the swarm didn't care about pride. Another system fell while they debated. Then, another. The emergency council session was called to vote on Yajin's proposal. She was allowed to present her findings to the full assembly. Telmoon, the elderly Solarian who had spoken against humanity 50 years ago, listened with his eyes closed. He remembered his words about humans being too emotional, too unpredictable. Traits that had seemed like flaws then. Traits that might be strengths now. Vexter opposed the idea with everything he had. "We banished them for good reason. They were dangerous and unstable. Bringing them back now is admitting we were wrong." "We were wrong," Telmoon said, opening his eyes. The chamber went silent. Telmoon rarely spoke anymore, but his voice still carried weight. "I voted for the banishment. I feared human emotion and chaos. But I watched the swarm consume our worlds with perfect logic and coordination, and I realized something. Perhaps chaos is exactly what we need." The vote was close. Species divided along old lines, pride against survival. In the end, survival won by the smallest margin. The council would send a delegation to the Sol system. They would ask for help from the species they had rejected. The delegation's ship approached the old sealed wormhole gate with caution. No one knew if it would even work anymore. But as they drew close, the gate suddenly blazed to life. Someone on the other side had activated it. The message was clear. Humanity had been watching and waiting. The ship passed through the wormhole. The delegation got their first view of the Sol system in 50 years. What they saw took their breath away. The primitive system they remembered had been transformed into something magnificent. Massive orbital platforms surrounded Earth. Cities on Mars glowed with light. The asteroid belt was home to thousands of mining and manufacturing stations. Ships moved everywhere, sleek and fast and obviously advanced. "They've been busy," the delegation leader whispered. A communication came through immediately. "Council delegation, this is Sol System Defense Command. We've been expecting you." The voice was human, speaking perfect galactic standard with just a hint of amusement. "Please proceed to coordinates we're transmitting. President Juan is ready to receive you." As they flew toward the designated meeting point, the delegation saw more wonders. A ship passed them that seemed to bend space around itself. A station rotated to generate gravity using principles they didn't recognize. A massive construction project around Jupiter that looked like it was building something planet-sized. What have they become? Someone whispered. The answer came when they docked at Unity 1, humanity's largest orbital station. President Giwan met them in a conference room that had windows showing Earth below. She was young and confident, nothing like the desperate, banished humans of 50 years ago. "Welcome," she said simply. "I understand you have a problem with something called the Swarm." Vexter, who had insisted on leading the delegation despite his age, tried to maintain dignity. "We request a discussion about possible cooperation in a mutual threat." Giwan smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Let me translate that. You're losing a war, and you want us to save you." The silence that followed was heavy. Then Yejin, the youngest member of the delegation, stood up. "Yes," she said clearly. "That's exactly right. We were wrong to banish you. We're here because you're our last hope. Please help us." Guan's expression softened. She appreciated honesty. "Now we can talk," she said. "Tell me everything about the Swarm." The conference room on Unity 1 was quiet except for the soft hum of the station's systems. President Juan sat across from the council delegation, her hands folded on the table. Behind her stood Tai Yong, her chief of staff, a man known for his sharp mind and sharper tongue. The council delegation looked uncomfortable, sitting in chairs that were designed for human bodies and discussing a situation they never imagined facing. Vexter tried to establish control of the conversation. "The Council is prepared to offer humanity limited access to certain trade routes in exchange for military assistance against the Swarm." Taeyong laughed, an actual laugh that echoed in the formal space. "Limited access? You lock us in our system for 50 years, and now offer us scraps?" "You must understand our position," Vexter said stiffly. "The Council has procedures, protocols. We cannot simply erase 50 years of policy because of one crisis." Juan leaned forward. "One crisis? Your reports say the Swarm has destroyed 12 systems? That's not a crisis. That's an extinction event." She pulled up a holographic display showing the Swarm's advance. "At current speed, they'll reach your core worlds in 2 months. How many protocols will matter then?" Admiral Kexther, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Madam President, what would you consider fair terms?" "Full reinstatement," Taeyong said immediately. "Complete voting rights on the council, access to all trade routes and resources, and a formal apology broadcast across every system in the galaxy." Several delegates gasped. Vexter's face went dark with anger. "Unacceptable. You ask too much, do we?" Giwan stood and walked to the window. Earth filled the view, beautiful and blue. "We've done quite well without you. Our technology advanced faster without council regulations slowing us down. Our people are happy. Our economy is strong. Honestly, we don't need the council at all. And why are we talking?" Vexter demanded. Giwan turned back to face them. "Because despite what you did to us, we're not going to let the galaxy burn. My grandmother was president when you banished us. She taught me that humans help people, even people who hurt us. It's who we are, but we're not fools. If we fight for you, it will be as equals." The negotiations stretched for hours. The council delegates tried every angle, every compromise that would let them maintain authority. But Juan and Taeyong held firm. Finally, Jejin spoke up again, her voice cutting through another circular argument. Stop, she said. Just stop. Pride is not worth dying for. She looked at Vexler. I've studied the swarm data. Every simulation says we lose. Every analysis shows the same result. Without a fundamentally different approach, the Council falls in 60 days. Humanity offers that different approach. Take the deal. Vexler looked like he had aged another decade in that moment. He knew she was right. They all knew it. I need to consult with the full council, he said quietly. You have 6 hours, Guan replied. After that, our offer expires. We'll seal the system again and let you handle your own problem. The delegation left to use the ship's long-range communication system. Guan and Taiyong waited in silence. Through the window, they could see human ships coming and going. A civilization that had built itself into something remarkable through sheer determination. 4 hours later, the response came. The council had voted. Humanity would be reinstated with full rights and representation. A formal apology would be issued. In return, humanity would commit military resources to fighting the swarm. Wise choice, Guan said simply. She immediately called Admiral Bojan, commander of the Human Defense Fleet. He appeared on the screen. A man in his 50s with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. I've been reviewing the swarm data you sent, he said without preamble. Interesting problem? Can we beat it? Juan asked. Boyan's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. Everything can be beaten. The question is how creative we're willing to get. Within hours, human military analysts had spread the swarm data across every screen in the Sol System Defense Command Center. Admiral Bojan walked through the room, looking at different displays, asking questions, making notes. The council had been studying the swarm for months and found no patterns. Bojan found 3 in the first hour. They're too efficient, he said to his assembled officers. Look at this. Every movement is optimized. Every formation is perfect. Every adaptation is logical. He pulled up footage of a swarm attack. They're like a machine that learned how to fight. But machines are predictable once you understand their programming. The council couldn't predict them, one officer pointed out. Because the council fights like a bigger machine, Bojan replied. Formal tactics, standard formations, proven weapons. The swarm calculates the most logical response and adapts. But humans. He grinned. We don't always do the logical thing. He outlined his plan and even his own officers looked skeptical. It involved attacking from multiple directions with no clear pattern. Using weapons in ways they weren't designed for. Broadcasting noise across all frequencies to confuse the swarm's coordination. Creating chaos instead of order. It's insane, his second officer said. Exactly, Boyan agreed. That's why it might work. Admiral Nari sat in her quarters aboard the flagship Unity, a name chosen deliberately. She was old now, in her 80s, and officially retired. But when she heard humanity was going to war, she had volunteered immediately. Some of the young officers didn't understand why this elderly woman wanted to risk her life. Those who knew history understood. Nari had been there at the banishment. She had watched Deho fight alone while the galaxy voted to throw them out. Now she would be there when humanity returned to save that same galaxy. You don't have to do this, Guan had told her during a private meeting. Yes, I do, Nari replied. I need to see their faces when they realize what they gave up. The human defense fleet assembled in formation outside Unity 1, 70 ships. Each one built using technology the Council couldn't match. They didn't look like Council vessels with their aggressive angles and obvious weapons. Human ships were sleek and elegant. But the power they contained was obvious to anyone with sensors. The Council delegation watched the fleet prepare to depart. Kexther, the experienced admiral, studied the ships with a military expert's eye. Their design is all wrong, he muttered. No obvious weapon ports. Strange energy signatures. How do they even fight? I guess we're about to find out, Eugene said quietly. Captain Subin stood on the bridge of her ship, the Horizon now designated as a scout vessel for the fleet. She had never been in a real war. None of the younger generation had, but they had trained for this their entire careers, preparing for a day when humanity might need to prove itself to the galaxy again. "Ships report ready," her communication officer announced. Admiral Boyan's voice came through the fleet channel. "This is Boyan to all vessels. Today, we go to fight an enemy that has defeated every force sent against it. The swarm thinks it understands war. It has calculated every logical response and prepared for traditional tactics. So we're going to show it something it has never seen before. We're going to be human. Unpredictable, creative, and absolutely refusing to lose. The galaxy is watching. Let's give them a show. Fleet, jump in 3, 2, 1. The ships vanished, entering wormhole space for the journey to the war zone. In the conference room, Giwan stood beside the council delegation, watching the fleet disappear. "Your people are brave," Vexter said quietly. "They're not just fighting for us," Juan replied. "They're fighting for the galaxy, because that's what humans do. We help even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when the people we're helping don't deserve it." Vexter had no answer for that. He simply watched the space where the fleet had been and hoped it would be enough. The journey took 3 days. When the human fleet emerged in the Chiral Nebula, they found a war zone. Council ships fought desperately against swarm vessels, falling back slowly, losing ships with every engagement. The swarm ships moved like a single organism, perfect and deadly. Then the human fleet arrived, and the broadcast began. Music, human music from dozens of cultures, blasted across every frequency. The swarm ships hesitated, trying to process this illogical input. In that moment of confusion, the human ships attacked from 17 different vectors simultaneously, using weapons that bent physics in ways the swarm had never encountered. The battle for the galaxy had begun, and it would be fought on humanity's terms. The Chiral Nebula had never seen a battle like this. Purple and blue clouds of cosmic dust swirled around 3 star systems while ships fought in the spaces between. The swarm controlled the center, its vessels forming geometric patterns of perfect efficiency. Council forces held the outer regions, desperately trying to slow the enemy advance. And now, cutting through the middle like sharks through water, came the human fleet. Captain Subin watched her tactical display and grinned. The swarm was trying to predict human movements, and it was clearly confused. Every time it calculated the optimal response to one attack, humans were already doing something completely different 3 systems away. "Horizon 2, all scout ships," she transmitted. "Pattern Gamma 7, but add that twist we practiced." "You know the one I mean," her fellow captains confirmed, their voices excited. Pattern Gamma 7 was a standard flanking maneuver. The twist was anything but standard. As the swarm ships moved to counter the expected attack, human vessels suddenly reversed course. Used the gravity of a nearby moon to slingshot in the opposite direction, and hit the swarm from behind while broadcasting children's lullabies at full volume. "Why are they singing?" Kexter demanded from his position on the council flagship. He was watching the battle alongside Eugene, trying to understand the chaos. "I have no idea," Eugene admitted. "But look at the swarm. It keeps pausing, like it's trying to process something that doesn't make sense." Admiral Bojan was coordinating the assault from the flagship Unity, where Admiral Nari stood beside him. "The swarm learns from combat data," Bojan explained to the council observers. "But we're not giving it useful data. Every attack is different. Every tactic is new. By the time it adapts to one approach, we've moved on to something else." A swarm cruiser targeted the Unity, firing weapons that had destroyed countless council ships. Nari watched calmly as the human shields absorbed the blast without effort. "Our turn," she said quietly. The Unity fired something the council sensors couldn't identify. It looked like a ball of compressed light that moved slowly, almost lazily, toward the swarm ship. The enemy vessel shields came up, clearly designed to deflect energy weapons. The light ball touched the shields and then did something impossible. It passed through them like they weren't there and struck the hull directly. The swarm ship went dark, all power lost, drifting helplessly. "What was that?" Kexter asked. "Resonance weapon," Bojan replied. "It doesn't attack the shields. It vibrates at a frequency that makes the ship's own power systems shut down. The swarm's shields are designed to stop external attacks, not internal resonance, across the battlefield. Human ships were using tactics that seemed to come from a dozen different military doctrines mixed together randomly. One group fought in tight formation like ancient naval ships. Another spread out and attacked individually with no apparent coordination. A third group seemed to be playing tag with the enemy, drawing them into chase sequences that ended in ambushes. "There's no pattern," Jejin said, watching in amazement. "How do they coordinate without a pattern?" "We don't coordinate the same way you do," Nari explained. "We give our captains objectives, not instructions. Each captain decides how to achieve their goal. It looks like chaos because it is chaos. Beautiful, effective chaos." The swarm was adapting, but slowly. It had been built to counter logical tactics. Human illogic was something it struggled to process. When human ships started using debris from destroyed vessels as improvised projectiles, the swarm tried to calculate trajectories. But the debris was also broadcasting music, jokes, and random radio transmissions that humans found funny. The swarm's analysis systems were overwhelmed trying to find the tactical significance of a comedy routine from ancient Earth. Captain Subin led a strike team deep into the swarm formation. Her mission was dangerous, possibly suicidal. She had to plant resonance devices at specific points around the swarm's command ship. The approach was harrowing, dodging fire and using every trick she knew. Her shields were down to 30% when she reached the first deployment point. "Device 1 away," she reported. Moving to position 2. Behind her, other ships drew enemy fire, keeping the swarm distracted. It was working, but barely. Sabin's ship took a direct hit that knocked out her engines. She was drifting now, but close enough to deploy the second device manually. "Subin, abort Bojin," ordered. "Your ship is too damaged." "Almost there," she replied, manually aiming the device. "Just need 10 more seconds." Those 10 seconds felt like hours. Swarm ships were converging on her position. Her shields failed completely. Then the device launched, attaching itself to the target coordinates. "Device 2 deployed," Subin said. "Now would be a good time for a rescue." The horizon vanished in a burst of light as a human destroyer's tractor beam yanked her clear just before the swarm weapons would have destroyed her. She was safe, and the devices were in place. Dr. Murray watched from Unity 1 back in the Sol system. She was too old to go into battle, but her weapons were there fighting for her. The resonance technology was her life's work. It's developed over decades of research that council regulations would never have allowed. Now, it would save the galaxy that had rejected her. "All devices in position," reported the tactical officer. "Then let's finish this," Murray said softly. Admiral Nari had insisted on leading the final assault personally. Against Boyan's protests, against every tactical consideration. She had taken command of a fast attack ship and now raced toward the swarm's mothership. The massive vessel was the size of a moon, controlling millions of smaller ships through a hive mind connection. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Boyan demanded. "Something that needs to be done," she replied. Her ship was badly damaged, hit multiple times, but she pushed it forward. The swarm thinks in terms of efficiency and logic. It needs to understand something else. It needs to understand sacrifice. She opened a broadcast on all frequencies, one that the swarm's collective intelligence would certainly detect. And then she began transmitting everything human. Music, art, literature, history. She transmitted the sound of a baby's first cry, the image of lovers meeting after long separation, the recording of a crowded stadium cheering for their team. She sent mathematics and poetry, war and peace. The best and worst of what humanity had ever been. The swarm's response was immediate and panicked. Its ships lost formation, confused by data that had no tactical value but somehow felt overwhelming. The collective intelligence tried to process human emotion. Human chaos, human love and hate and joy and sadness all at once. "Now, Dr. Murray," Nari shouted. Back at Unity 1, Murray activated the resonance devices. They had been placed at precise points around the battlefield, creating a network of overlapping frequencies. When activated together, they created a wave that traveled through the swarm's hive-mind connection, amplifying Narra's broadcast 1,000,000 times over. The swarm mothership shuddered. Inside its collective consciousness, it experienced something it was never designed to handle. Not weapons, not tactics, but the sheer overwhelming reality of human existence. Every emotion, every contradiction, every beautiful mess that made humans who they were. The hive mind fractured. Individual swarm ships suddenly found themselves alone, cut off from the collective. They had no individual intelligence, no way to function independently. They simply stopped, drifting in space like abandoned toys. Nari's ship, too damaged to escape, drifted toward the mothership's hull. "Tell them I said hello," she transmitted one last time. Then her ship impacted the mothership's surface. Both vessels were consumed in a burst of light. The silence that followed was complete. 3 star systems, suddenly quiet. Millions of swarm vessels now inactive. And one human hero, gone but not forgotten. Bojan stood on Unity's bridge, his eyes closed. He had known Nari his entire life. She had been his mentor, his friend, his hero. Around him, the crew stood in respectful silence. "Admiral," the communication officer said quietly, "Council flagship is hailing us." Kexler S's face appeared on the screen. The military leader looked like he had aged a decade in the few hours of battle. "Admiral Boyan, the swarm appears to be defeated. Your Admiral Nari." "I have no words. She saved us all." "She did what humans do," Bojan replied, his voice steady despite his grief. "She fought for something bigger than herself." The war ended not with celebration, but with reflection. The council gathered in emergency session, not to debate, but to acknowledge. Vexler stood before the assembly, looking older and wearier than ever. 50 years ago, I led the vote to banish humanity," he said. "I called them dangerous, unstable, a threat to galactic peace. Today, they saved us from extinction. I was wrong. We were all wrong. And I owe them an apology that I can never fully express." The formal apology was broadcast across every system in the galaxy. Humanity was not just reinstated, but honored. Admiral Nari became the first being in galactic history to receive the Council's highest medal posthumously. A memorial was built in orbit between Earth and the Council homeworld, visible from both. Showing her ship's final flight, President G1 accepted the Council's offer to join as full members. "But with conditions. We'll share our technology," she announced. "We'll teach our tactics. We'll help the galaxy grow. But we do it our way. We don't follow old rules just because they're old. We innovate. We question. We try the impossible. And if you can't accept that, then we'll go back to our system and wish you well." The Council accepted. What choice did they have? 6 months later, the galaxy had changed. Human technology spread through trade agreements. Council species sent their best students to learn at human academies. The rigid structures that had governed for millions of years began to bend, allowing new ideas and approaches. Captain Subin, promoted and honored, gave tours to the first class of alien cadets training at the Sol System Academy. She showed them human ships, explained human tactics, and answered their endless questions. "Why do you do things that seem illogical?" asked a young Korathi student. Subin smiled. "Because logic is just one tool in the box. Sometimes you need emotion. Sometimes you need intuition. Sometimes you need to try something that everyone says won't work just to see what happens. That's how we survived 50 years alone. That's how we beat the swarm. And that's what we'll teach you." Dr. Murray, now ancient but still sharp, received visitors from across the galaxy. Scientists who wanted to learn from her, students who saw her as a living legend. She welcomed them all with the same advice. Never let anyone tell you what's impossible. Make them prove it. And somewhere in deep space, at the memorial to Admiral Nari, ships from 100 worlds stopped to pay respects. Human ships and council ships together, no longer separate, but united. The plaque read simply, "She fought for all of us." The galaxy had learned its lesson. Different wasn't dangerous. Strange wasn't wrong. And sometimes, the beings you push away are exactly the ones you need most.